My name is Willie Ermine. I work as a traditional health coordinator at Sturgeon Lake First Nation. I have been with academia for 23 years, and since my work here for the past 8 years or so, I have been involved in trying to understand and recover and even revitalize our traditional ancestral knowledge regarding health in all its different dimensions. So that's what we continue to do. We practice and we learn and we offer programming and we work on this indigenous knowledge about health as much as we can, using elders and also knowledge keepers and also our own community practice here. So one of the many things that happens, of course, are these different spheres of conditions that we have to look at. I mean, health covers just a vast field, all in different categories, different ways of understanding them, different treatments, different programmings to work with any kind of condition that might be presented to us. So of course, harm reduction and addictions and all the related ideas about there's a term that I forgot. It's people who use drugs and alcohol. This is my understanding of the harm reduction that is required and how our ancestors would have thought about these situations or these conditions. So when we talk about harm reduction, I'm thinking that we're talking in that field of addictions, and that's that's what I will talk about. How, and the question, of course, in my mind, goes back to the ancestors to ask them, what would you have done in this situation, given the situation that we have today? They had their own forms of addiction, I imagine, different different ailments or different situations at different times in history. So one of the things that comes up all the time, of course, is, and that's the underpinning of our knowledge. Our knowledge system is the spiritual aspect of our knowledge. And you get into holism. So we're talking about the mind, the body, the soul, the emotions, and that holistic concept. And when we think about harm reduction, that we try to think of it relative to these different dimensions of our humanity. So one of the things that we understand is the spiritual nature, or try to understand, is the spiritual nature of harm, of addiction or substance abuse. We can call it substance abuse. And one of the many different ways that we think about it is that in Indigenous thought, many of our conditions are outside of our soul, if we can put it that way. That they are not a possession, but things that just try to impede us or impair our minds and our soul. So the substance abuse really is talking about ways that people who are abusive like that it's self-inflicted, and then there's a reason for that. And so we go back again to think about, well, what would make a person start to use substances in the first place? And so that'll be sort of a yearning, a human yearning that they would have. And when we look at our spirituality, when we look in that category, we try to understand well, what is the spiritual aspect in this abuse of substances? And we look at again, of course, there are many arguments for that, but we have the whole colonial situation, or intergenerational trauma, or things like that that automatically interfere in how the way we conduct our lives. So a spiritual yearning of some sort. And when we work with those, and I'm not going to get into the treatment processes of that and how we work with them, but we see the spiritual yearning that is evident in the people that come to see us here. And that's what we try to work with, is their own spirituality, and present them a picture of what spirituality might look like for them. And there's when they start talking about these issues, of course they get into the lifestyle, they get into the colonial aspect of it all, and but we try to get that out of the way, and get them to talk deeper about the core issues that they may be facing. And so this, in many instances, what we work with are what we work with traditional medicines, and we work with different kinds of smudges that are for the mind, for the emotions, for purifying the body and the mind and the soul. So we use different medicines for any of these people that come to see us, to help them out. But the basic question really is, what are they yearning for? And so this is one avenue that I can say that in our understanding of substances, that our elders tell us everything is spiritual. So one of the ways we try to understand is, okay, how does this substance become an entity? It's an entity now that has entered the life of this individual. And so when we think like that, and we start thinking that these substances are entities in their own right, then it opens up other possibilities, that we can actually talk with these substances, and tell them that, or negotiate with them to say, this person wants a healthy life. You yourself, you want also your life to continue. How can we negotiate how you work with this individual, or how you impact this individual, or how to leave this individual alone? So in a spiritual sense, this, of course, is not in any kind of a psychological book, or even method to operate like this, that we work in the spiritual dimension when we address a lot of these issues about substance abuse. So harm reduction, it even though we have these practices, the central idea is that we mirror the person that comes to us, regarding if they need help. We mirror and bounce back this idea that they have the resources, they have the interior resources that they can work with, that they're given all these resources by creation that they can use, and somehow they have forgotten about these resources, these human resources that we all have. And that includes matters of spirit, that includes matters of mind, and emotions and feelings, and even body biological needs. So we try to mirror and get them to think about their own story. And so with that aspect of it, we get them to story what it is that they're experiencing. What is their story? That is the main thing that they have to uh, express is their own story, and to help them understand that this is their story, and that we have to leave it as their story. It's not, they cannot give it to me, they cannot blame me or anybody else. This is their story. So the storyline is very important for them to, it's a counseling technique anyway, that you get them to say those words that say that they are responsible for where they are at. And so in terms of spiritual understanding, then we 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 try to work with the substance itself, and then we work with the individual. And then what is the yearning that the individual has? Why go into substances or substance abuse? And again, that takes us into another direction of the unseen, the unseen energies that are at play in substance abuse. So one of the ways that we, no, I lost my thought on that one, but you know, there are different kinds of traditional practices that we use in harm reduction. So we get them to tell their story. We get them to understand, or try to get them to talk about the yearnings that they have, the spiritual yearnings, and how we can help them with their own spirituality. And in that sense, we get them into different, there's the counseling session itself. There's the use of medicine to help them with their intentions and their commitments to repair their situation. And we get them into sweat lodges, we get them into further discussion and talk about the family. So one of the things that we did in relative to this, trying to uncover the knowledge about substance abuse and then harm reduction, we sat down, some academics, some of our elders, our knowledge keepers, and there were maybe about 10 of us that talked about, that had a dialogue about substance abuse and how we can do cessation of opioids, for example. And so within that, we came up with a plan that would address and for us to offer harm reduction practices. And that is where we got into the idea that we can talk with these entities that enter the lives of these people. We're talking about the different substances, different opioids, because our understanding is that they come from natural settings, and somehow over time that they've been interpreted, or they have been reformulated to become something other than what they were originally. Like the opioids, for example, was a medication for pain and all that, but somehow it became synthetic and it became abused and all that. So, but when we go back to the original plant, the original substance, we find a lot of them are very natural substances, except all these, concoctions that have been artificially created. But that is one avenue that we can negotiate in a spiritual sense with these substances. And so that becomes a part of the practice. And how we do that, of course, there are different techniques that we have. And then the other thing is we not only look at the individual, but there's also that dimension opens up to include family. So what do we do with family? There's a whole core group that we have to work with. We have to work with the context that they live in. We have to work with the family, and then it gets into training and all that has been discussed already. So in in cessation of opioids, that plan involved this idea that we can do the spiritual work to bring back the spirit, for example, to bring back the spirit of this person who has become shy to, associate with this individual, and to bring back, and for the people that need to work on this are those people that have a right to work in this area, and that I haven't seen that being discussed anywhere. That certain people that have a right to work with substance abusers in terms of harm reduction. And the people that have the right are those people exactly who have experienced what it's like to hit rock bottom in substance abuse. And so they, through that whole process, they have recovered. And then so they in our spiritual thinking, they have the right to invite people back into healthiness because they know what it's like. They can talk about it, and they have experienced it. So it's a spiritual right that is often in the way that we see things, that it that has to be a part of that picture. So it's not psychologists, it's not doctors, and it's not any of these people who have not gone through that kind of a journey that can start to do the repair job. It happens at different levels, different dimensions, and so in that kind of work, well, I wish I had questions to go by, because there's so much that in that plan that we have, we had to bring the spirit back, to sing the spirit back, and to welcome the individual back into health, and then get into the educational process of not only their lifestyle, but also their home, their family. And it had to be in places other than institutions, other places other than four walls, or established treatment centers. It had to be a different approach. It had to be land-based. We needed to work with nature to create the context for this recovery to happen. So a lot of that picture about how we manage the whole recovery thing became quite extensive, and but I have to say that we have not proceeded to practice the whole thing, because again, a lot of this is dependent on funding that'll happen. But if you had any questions, I would be glad to work with those questions.
Yeah, I'm just trying to feverishly write down some notes, Willie, but really beautiful so far. I'm kind of like getting a scope of what you're discussing, and I wrote down it's sort of the journey of harm reduction, and then, as you said, singing the spirit back. It's bringing the people with lived experiences are going to be our teachers when we're looking to how we can deal with harm reduction, and I think that is very poignant. I guess not a question, but
Yeah, and we know that how we look at harm reduction, we see people with, substance abusers as kind of um, they're damaged and they are, um, and they're not, optimum is probably the best way of saying it. They're not optimum. Which again, another dimension of looking at the ancestors' way of thinking about all of this and would be this idea of shifting this idea of a damaged person and shifting the idea to um, what we can call giftedness, that that all of us are given value, value additions as we were born to this earth. We the Creator gave us so much already as at, at conception, or at birth. The Creator gave us so much value, and it's up to us to embrace that and to grow it. That's the work of parents, right? For little children to to water the flower, to make it optimum. uh, but we have a lot of gifts when we come to this world, and I can think of, say, for example, compassion. Everybody has compassion. Everybody has this mystery embedded in them, and everybody has this strength embedded in them. We come to the earth automatically with those kind of gifts, and then there are other ones that are could be inherited or even be given to people, different kinds of gifts, and they all point to our interior resources. And these gifts that we have been given are also very relevant to this idea of harm reduction and how we work with harm reduction. Because instead of seeing damaged individuals, instead of seeing people who are rock bottom and subhuman, maybe in some instances, but instead of seeing them like that, when we think about giftedness in people, we start to think about how our minds are supposed to be very powerful in service of what the soul is trying to accomplish. Okay. Nowadays, we have made our mind to be the leader, that it's the master. Our mind is the master. I know in academia, that's what they really work on a lot. But the mind is supposed to be a servant to the soul. And so when we talk about soul needs, there are all these inherent gifts that we all have. For example, intuition, you know, how does that work? What is how does that work? How can we use intuition? And it's a gift that we have, that we are not given the ability to see the future, nor even the next day or whatever. But intuition can help us, detect what that might be, what that future might be like. We have the capacity of dreaming. How do we interpret dreams? Our ancestors really thought dreams were very important in terms of how our soul is guiding us in our life journey. Dreams become a venue where the ancestors give us the warning signals or tell us the guiding principles and all of that. So it happens through dreams, and everybody has those. So we get into dreams and high sensing. High sensing um, is something that healers will use, for example, but everybody has sensing abilities. But there's a category of high sensors, and we may call these people empath. But high sensing is also can be either a gift or a curse in many instances, because high sensing, you know, is this is the, what Stephen Booner has called gating channels. You know, we see babies with their gating channels wide open. That's why they're taking in all the light, all the sounds, all the everything. They're just absorbing it all because they have not learned to close gating channels. And if we think about a person getting a watch, you know, that watch is going to bother them for a whole week. You know, they'll keep adjusting it and watching, and until about after a week, they close that gating channels, and the watch, they won't even know they're wearing a watch anymore after they close that gating channel. So those gating channels are sensitivities, and and for many people that those are wide open in terms of how they sense other people, or how they sense environments, how they sense nature, and how they sense the unseen. So that can either be a gift or it can be a curse in many and so many people, I think, in our mind, that substance abusers, these kinds of interior workings of our humanity sometimes are misinterpreted, or they're not acknowledged, or they're not understood, and so it becomes you know, kind of it may become overwhelming for people to start seeing figures in the corner of their eye, or to sense other people's anger, or to sense other people's dilemmas, or whatever it is. They'll pick up and extract feelings and senses, and they think these are their own, when in fact they are just sensing them. So a lot of these kind of questions that come from our past are very relevant to how we work with harm reduction. It's not a matter of injecting chemicals in a body, or giving pills, or there has to be that whole question that the spiritual aspect has to be addressed, and the giftedness that people have. How do we work with mystery, our interior mystery? That's a big item, that all our encounters are mysterious moments. We don't know what's going to happen 1 minute from now. The people that we meet, we don't know them, even though superficially we might know their name, but we don't know what kind of a person they are, what kind of feelings they have, or thoughts, or anything like that. So every encounter we have is a mystery. And I think the encounter with substances is the same thing. It's a moment of mystery, and to understand why that encounter happens and how we deal with it, we have to understand certain spiritual aspects which take us into the world of the unseen, the unknown, and all these matters were understood by our elders, our knowledge keepers, our spiritualists. They that was in our culture. They understood that spirituality, and so a lot of that has to enter the picture of harm reduction.